The beginning to one of the greatest rivalries in sports, Ohio State versus Michigan. Doesn't get too much bigger than that, and people often wonder, well, where did it all begin? Well, it actually began in a war. Funny how all things begin in wars. But the boundary between Michigan and Ohio was being fought for the territory, which Ohio would end up winning, and it's known as Toledo area. Ohio State would go on to win, but this caused a huge conflict between the two states and essentially created the rivalry that we carry out on the field today. It's pretty cool to think that they've been holding on to this rivalry for that long. Just a little brief history about both Ohio State and Michigan. During the early stages of the rivalry, Michigan dominated almost every performance. They were the powerhouse of the Big Ten, and Ohio State wasn't even in a conference yet. They were just getting started as a program. Michigan, on the other hand, has dominated as a program forever, since they started as a school. Ohio State is not quite the same way. Ohio State actually started off more slowly, and they had to build more of a program than Michigan. And Ohio State, like I said, wasn't even in the Big Ten, their conference that they're in now originally. They were just the sole program. So being in the Big Ten conference has obviously added even more heat to this rivalry, because when Ohio State joined, there was the Big Ten playoff, the Big Ten title game, and this is what Michigan and Ohio State would fight for at the end of every season when they would play each other, which is pretty cool. One of the coolest parts of the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry has to be the coaches. There has been so many great coaches for Michigan and for Ohio State. It's been so fun to watch, but there's two that really started and fueled this rivalry, and that is Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes. These guys competed like no other. They hated each other on the field, but loved each other off the field. And it's safe to say that they both won their fair share of games against each other. The next two coaches is Rich Rodriguez and Jim Tressel. These two guys were more during my lifetime, and I watched Jim Tressel dominate Rich Rodriguez in almost all the games that he played in. The next is the most recent, and that is Urban Meyer and Jim Harbaugh. These two guys have gone at it, but unfortunately, or fortunately for us Ohio State fans, Urban Meyer has won all the games against Jim Harbaugh. But we'll see what happens, as Urban Meyer is now stepping down as the. Throughout these Ohio State-Michigan games, there has been some of the biggest moments in college football still to this day. There has been overtime victories, first downs that sealed the game, and Hail Marys that have won the game. So right here, this is very old, but we have a Ohio State running back who picked up 2 yards to seal the game after Ohio State came back from a 17-point deficit. This was one of the craziest games in Michigan history as well, because they were supposed to beat Ohio State. This is more recent. This happened actually 3 years ago, and J.T. Barrett here, the Ohio State quarterback, was actually short of the first down, but the refs gave them the first down, and Ohio State would go on to win that game, and that was a huge conflict. Here we have the legendary field goal snap. Ohio State was trailing 10 points in the fourth quarter, and we came all the way back and to kick a field goal to win the game, which was very cool. And the next one is probably the biggest game in Ohio State-Michigan history. This is in 2006, and both teams were undefeated, going to the national championship. Whoever wins this game would go. So much was on the line, and Ohio State would end up winning with their quarterback Troy Smith, who would go on to win the Heisman. This was considered the most intense Ohio State-Michigan game ever. So now going into some of the most recent games we have over the past 3 or 4 years. They've been really entertaining, especially if you're a Ohio State fan, because they've won the last 7 in a row. Some of the more recent games have ended in overtime victories, which was nuts. We actually, this year, beat Michigan 62-39, which was not expected, considering Michigan had the #1 defense in the nation. I had a lot of Michigan fans really excited for this game. They were supposed to actually beat Ohio State, but this didn't happen, and I got to talk a lot of smack afterwards. For the Michigan side of things, this is a real disappointment. over the last 7 seasons. They brought in a new coach, Jim Harbaugh, specifically to make the college football playoff and beat Ohio State. Two things, and he hasn't done that yet, so we'll see what happens. The biggest factor to all the most recent news, though, is Coach Urban Meyer stepping down as their head coach. This is totally going to affect recruiting and winning, no doubt, for a while. So we'll see how things play out with our head coach gone. Some say that the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry is just as big off the field as it is on. Ohio State and Michigan compete in various ways, excluding football. One of the coolest ways is through charity. The Second Harvest Food Bank, they see how much money can be raised between the two colleges, and whoever makes the most wins, because you have to be competitive in a rivalry. Another charity they look at is the Salvation Army. This is cool because they actually calculate, what Ohio State donates compared to Michigan. The Salvation Army does that, which I think is really cool, to help the rivalry. It'll be interesting to see as the rivalry continues how things unfold with Ohio State's head coach stepping down, Michigan's coach having good recruiting. I personally, as a Ohio State fan, am a little nervous for the next couple years, but I'm very excited to see how this rivalry continues and how it turns out.